Hi there, my name is totally not the Pope, and I'm a Canadian, hence the plaid, you know, I'm a real lumberjack. And I'm here today to give you a crash course on the first contact moments, let's say, of America, because as a Canadian, I'm very qualified to teach you about American history. So we shall begin with the quote-unquote invasion of America. Basically, Spain wanted to find some new trade routes because the Middle East gave a big fuck you to everyone in Europe because they didn't feel like being the middlemen. And there was a country in Southeast Asia that was not exactly keen on being left out of the profits to be made off the spice trade. So, Christopher Columbus was hired by Spain to try to find a way around the world and find a new way to cheat the system and have their own spice trade that they can make the most profit off of. Now, a little history on the continent of North America. Natives first arrived about 30 to 20,000 years before first contact when Christopher Columbus arrived. This was essentially during the time of the land bridge when they followed game patterns through the land bridge from Siberia to Alaska and down through that area of traffic. On the eve of contact, there were about at least 50 million people on the continent, all various tribes that adapted to the different environments that they settled in. And they all had their own civilizations. It's not how many people will portray it as savages. For example, between California and everything above Texas, they would have traveled north and south depending on the weather so that they could survive, because the winter and summer were pretty drastic during those times in those areas. And then, 1492, Christopher motherfucking Columbus shows up. He has just been sent by the superpower of the world, Spain, who, in light of the Renaissance, was like, oh shit, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. Let's go figure out what's out there. And when Columbus first arrived, it was actually believed to be a fulfillment of a prophecy by the native culture. And they believed that a white human would show up over the seas, and that would be some type of deity. So they were very welcoming to him at first. And then Christopher Columbus, while returning the politeness of the natives, he also noticed the vast wealth that there was to be, I guess you could say, pillaged out of these lands. First landing in Cuba and the rest of the Caribbean. And essentially, when he wrote back to Spain, they sent 500 troops to take out all of Central America, the Caribbean, and, like, some south by, like, the border of what is now Mexico and America. It took 500 conquistadors, armed with guns, mind you, to take out an entire, like, thousands and thousands of square miles of land and water combined. This, of course, was aided by the fact that 90% of the native population was absolutely decimated by disease that Europeans had been immune to because of their exposure to it. But these natives have never been introduced to anything like this, so they were just absolutely decimated, and it ruined them. It killed nearly 90% of the population. That's like, shit, 45 million people out of the 50 million people on the fucking continent. That's insane. However, the Spanish were not as horrible as you may think they were. They did have a policy of inclusion, and while that inclusion did include slavery to get things done, they didn't shun them like the British will 100 years later. So, I guess you can say that's good, not, I don't know, bad, good, The Europeans also, in a bid to get through this process faster, they allied with the enemies of the Inca, Mayans, and Aztecs. Well, the Mayans kind of took themselves out because they just kind of stopped focusing on the world around them. But essentially, they kind of allied with the enemies of the two most predominant tribes there. And basically, they said, so, you see those guys over there? You don't like them, right? Yeah. We don't like them either. Take them out. Okay. And then you guys get to share the wealth and you become our slaves. And then in 1499, Amerigo Vespucci founds New France up in southern Canada / northern United States. And the reason he went all the way up north away from the Bahamas is because Spain is a superpower. The French don't fuck with the Spanish. Nobody fucks with the Spanish at this time. They are the literal, like, this is, like, pretty much America of today's date, where they are, like, the most richest, most powerful country in the fucking world. Nobody messes with them, so France had to find a different route. And that's what led them to the St. Lawrence, by the Great Lakes. And that's basically why the French kind of created the French Crescent, which goes all the way around the Great Lakes, down through the middle of the States until they reached about New Orleans. And then, yeah, they basically stopped there and created a crescent, dividing it with the Spanish to their south and to their west, and the British would found the 13 colonies to their east. And the reason the French actually went down the St. Lawrence River is because they actually believed it was a pathway through the giant-ass continent into the Pacific where they could find a way to India, because they were all essentially trying to find new trade routes because they had been fucked by the Middle East, who they were also fucking. So it's like, it's mutual, it doesn't work well. They need to find new trade routes. The French also had a policy of inclusion, which again did include slaves, but they were also very inclusive. They let them live with them. They benefited off of each other. They engaged in trade and basically said, hey, if we're both going to be here, you might as well make the best of it, right? Not try to kill each other. Now, there was, of course, some resistance whenever the Spanish or French decided to push the natives off their land, but this was not as common as some people may think it was. The French profit off of forestry, fishing, and hunting, farming. Anything like that, anything that you can think of that is an industry in the Midwest/Southern Canada, Northeastern United States. Anything like that, that's what they profited off of. So they used the natives to their advantage, and some would say they abused them, but they actually, you know, oh shit, you actually know what you're talking about. They worked with the natives, and essentially they basically had a good deal that benefited both of them. However, it is to be noted that for both of these policies of inclusion, they did include religious conversion, because under their laws, the natives were not God-abiding people. So these natives on this land had no rights under their God or laws. So a lot of them converted them to Catholics, or at least tried. It didn't really work. These natives have been living here for 20,000 years. I think they know what they're going to and not going to do. Now, England. This is possibly one of the starts of what America is and how it became what it is today. They started off looking for riches the same way that the Spanish and French wanted to. They looked for new trade routes to Southeast Asia, and when they found out that there was an entire fucking continent, they're like, okay, I want in on this. This is pretty cool. So they ended up founding a colony, which some people may know of as Roanoke. Roanoke was the first ever attempt at a colony by the British on an island just off of Virginia, I believe. And this colony came there with supplies for about 6 months. The trip was about 2 months. And so when the ships returned to go get more supplies, they returned to Europe, and all of a sudden they're in the middle of a war that they weren't in when they left the continent. So and this war was between the English and Spanish. So this would also have something to do with who has rights over this new land. So new supplies weren't able to make it out of Europe until about 3 years later. And by that time, they returned to Roanoke, and there was no sign of civilization whatsoever. Nobody was there. There weren't even foundations for houses, not even like the pedestals where they'd hold town meetings and stuff. Everything just fucking disappeared, and nobody knew what happened. The only sign that any human had ever been there was a word carved into a tree, one of the trees there. And that word said Croatoan, C-R-O-A-T-O-A-N. And that is also the name of a nearby tribe. So there are many theories about either the natives, the Croatoan tribe, invading and killing them, the English settlers running out of supplies and resorting to, you know, crawling on their hands and knees and groveling towards the natives to take them in and show them how to live off the land there, because this is a totally new environment for them. They've never seen anything like this. There could have also been a storm that just completely wiped out the place, but that would never explain why it would say Croatoan unless someone saw the storm coming and said, hey, we went this way, and then the storm hit and everything disappeared. Nobody really knows. Those are just some theories. Now, the English were looking for new land, riches. Not only riches, but they had a very small country on their little island of the United Kingdom, or what would become the United Kingdom. So they wanted new land, and so they basically formed any of these 3 colonies throughout the first 13. So they would be royal, charter, or proprietary. And essentially, they were looking to colonize. They wanted new land, like I just said. And in doing this, they had a different approach compared to the French and Spanish. And this was a policy of exclusion, which was very freaking mean. They did not even want to include trade or relations with the natives. They pushed them straight off their land and wanted nothing to do with them. They used more coercion and violence rather than trade and bargaining. And it showed, because English and native relations for a long time were very fucking bad. They were just not good at all. And essentially, in the southern end of the eastern coast of America, or what is America now, agriculture grew, while in the northern and middle colonies, there was more of a diverse economy with that was less dependent on agriculture. And in this new land, children had a better chance to grow up and actually see days past their childhood, which I think we can all agree is something most of us would like to do. Plus, taxes were only a quarter of what they were in Europe, so it was very beneficial to come. Although it was very hard work and it was a very taxing life, it had its rewards, definitely. And so that is essentially why the British decided to colonize there, is because they were sick of having their asses just taxed so hard in Europe. And so, yeah, basically those 3 countries, as well as some minor developments made by the Dutch, Swedish, and some of the Portuguese. Those 6 countries, those 3 predominant ones though, are essentially the foundation of what America is today. And that is all I'm going to be covering in this video, because that was essentially the discovery and colonization of America. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe and comment anything else you would like to see. And I will be hopefully continuing this series if I can ever find time to do more like this. And yeah, this is something I look forward to doing. So yeah, just let me know what you think. Anyways, this was Totally Not the Pope. I'll see ya.